Okay, I'm live. Hello, everybody. This is Tin Man Lee, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about secrets of birds in flight. So how do I start? so birds in flight is my one of my favorite things to do for birds and wildlife photography, and indeed. I was very fortunate to have found this kind of subcategory of wildlife photography in the beginning, because I was fascinated by flying birds. Since I was young, I love to watch like hawks and eagles flying in the sky, and everybody. So welcome to the birds in flight talk. So I was very fascinated, but when I tried to, like many of you, I guess, I had a lot of obstacles to get a sharp picture of birds flying. And I didn't know that because of my journey to master birds in flight, it became one of the most important aspects for wildlife photography. So the secret of getting good in wildlife photography is to master your birds in flight. As simple as that. Okay, everybody agree? So how do you? Well, you don't really need to be the world's best birds in flight photographers to be good in wildlife photography, but you have to be pretty good in that. And the reason is some people say, well, birds in flight is the most difficult aspect because the birds fly so fast, right? But indeed, getting wildlife on the ground is as difficult, because sometimes they go from shadow to bright to all these different habitats, and they blend in really well. So you have to master birds in flight in order to have a chance for some of the animals on the ground. So I want to first share with you what is how to define a good birds in flight photos, because I see that many of you have been posting in this award-winning wildlife photographers group, and many of you tagged me, right? Like, if you want to hear my honest comment in your photo posting, definitely tag me and ask me for critique. Then every other members would know that, okay, you're willing to listen to positive comments. Otherwise, it's very difficult to improve, right? But anyways, when I browse through a lot of the photos and in this group, right, there are some typical, I'll say it, mistakes when the beginning photographers tend to make. And indeed, I was like that too. So when I first started burst in flight photography, what do? Right? You get a camera. I remember I had the Canon Rebel in the beginning when I first started, and I had a 100 to 400 lens. And what I did was I would go to a pier very close to me. I live in Los Angeles, and then I would go to some pier, and I would see seagulls and pelicans flying, right? And so what I would do is I would master my techniques. I would become very quick, right? And then, like, once you see the birds flying, and then you just raise your camera quickly and then try to follow their path and then get a few photos. And the result was very inconsistent. Sometimes you get them sharp. Sometimes I'm sure that the exposure would be correct, but then when they're flying around, and then sometimes it's too dark, and sometimes it's too bright, and sometimes the sharpness was not there. And so I was very frustrated. And of course, right now I don't really have any problems in getting like consistent exposure and sharpness now. But I realized that some of the things that newer photographers would overlook because what they always ask me is like, Tin Man, what is the best settings for burst in flight? I only need to know the settings. Like, what shutter speed? How do you use surrounding points or not? And like, what f-stop, what ISO are you using? And that's it, right? All I need is that. But like how I mentioned to you about the post processing in the previous Facebook Live. I don't know if any of you remember what I said, which was you have to start from the end Really, the end goal is more important than when you think about trying to get a sharp photo. So what I want to tell you is, if you look into, like after this talk, if you go back into our award-winning wildlife photographers group and you look on the post, like even if it's not birds in flight, you can see that a lot of people make certain mistakes. So one of the prerequisites, so there are 3 prerequisites for birds in flight that is like the bare minimal that the photos must have in order for it to have a chance that you get to publications, you get to and you really move people and getting sales and getting awards, right? So the number one is it has to have a very clean background. So having a clean background is actually one of the most overlooked factors, because people all are looking into the action, right? But actually the background is the most important. So I just think of an example right here. So if you are making a bowl of noodle soup, for example, right? You are in the kitchen, you are getting this big pot, and then you're cooking the noodle, and all the ingredient is good, and then you were cooking onto it, and all of a sudden there's a cockroach that jumped into it, right? So do you still continue to cook? I don't know if this is a good example, but the whole bowl, no matter how good the ingredient is gone. And this is the same as if your photo didn't have a clean background. The whole photo is ruined. Nobody really would even want to look into it. They may not tell you because they couldn't tell you on that. But in the first year or two when I started wildlife photography, a lot of the times when I nailed a really, really sharp photo, right? A seagull flying, a pelican flying perfectly sharp and all this, and then I show it to my friends, share it in Facebook and all. Nobody cared, and I was angry. It was like, this is one of my best photos right there. Like, how come they were not moved? So I got into this bitterness. I don't know, like I don't want to ask you if you have that, but I'm sure that sometimes we get frustrated when a photo that you think it is pretty good, but people wasn't moved by it. And I think one of the most critical thing is you have to have an open mind, because sometimes you may not see something when you are new, and when you put in a lot of effort, you put in a lot of hard work into it, and when people didn't react to it, it's like it's all their fault. It's not mine. I nailed it, right? But when you open your eyes and then check again on your background, for example, you realize that actually the background has like a cockroach walking by, and people would only look into the background because for human perception, we always look into the distraction first, right? And it's really a survival skill. And I always approach wildlife photography as like a psychology project, because it's all about the human perception of your image, right? So you have to think about that. If there is some really, really, really distracting thing in the background of the photo, people will look into that and they will miss the key moment of your photo, and then they say, this photo is nothing, next, and then they go into the next one. So for clean background, what I mean is preferably a non-sky background, and the reason is most of the time the sky background is either white or blue, and it's also quite bright. And one of the things you have to pay attention to is you always want, if you have a chance, you always want the birds, the color of the birds, or the brightness, the luminosity, that's what people will say, of the subject in your photo is brighter than the background. Because that's how you draw people in, right? And a sky background usually would have these problems. So you always look for maybe a distant forest or maybe a distant mountain, like some of those clean background, a very nice separation onto it to do that. And I made this big mistake in the beginning, and once I remove it, it changes my photography completely. So even if you don't post in our group, just go to the group after this talk and check on it and look into how the background is showing in the. Let me just share with you some of the example of. So for example, like in this photo right here, right, you see that. The background is completely creamy. There's no distraction onto it, right? So this is one of the examples of how you train your eyes to see something, okay? So, all right. So thanks, James, for I'm looking at the comments. So I'm glad that you guys agree with the first one, which is very non-romantic, right? Is that like, Tin Man, I want to have this really great photo of a hawk catching something like squirrel and then like flying and all this awesome action, like waiting for them to bring back to the chicks to feed it, right? And to land and all these things. But the problem is, if you don't have a clean background, like a lot of you posted photos with all these branches in the background, and people are gonna look into the branches and got annoyed, and they will not even look into the content of the photo. Unfortunately, this is because of the human survival, as I mentioned to you, and so this is number one, right? And some of you may say that, dude, Tin Man, like, how can you avoid branches in nature, right? I mean, this is a whole forest, right? This is all trees and branches and all. And this is impossible, right? And I agree with you, and I thought so too in the beginning, because no matter where I go, all I see were branches and leaves blocking the owl, right? All these things. And I thought it was impossible. And turned out it's possible, and I'll tell you later how to do it. But trust me on that. The background is you have to be brutally honest, like even a single branch or just like a tiny little bit of leaves or something, if it doesn't add to the photo, it distracts the attention, then the photo is a no-go. You can still enjoy the scenery, like what I said, like if I go into a field, people told me, hey, there's a nice owl sighting, you want to go? And I go and I watch it, and once I know that the background is a no-go, I'll just enjoy it. I just watch the bird, just enjoy it. But there's no point in getting any photos, because in terms we are making art here. We are not being a documentary. Like we are not doing a documentary, right? So you can still take some ID photo or a documentary photo, but it's not gonna move people in a way. So okay, so second one is eye level. So you said, hey man, like this one is already crazy enough, right? And this one is even crazier, right? Like we are doing birds in flight right here. How do you do eye level when the bird is flying, right? The bird is always flying in the sky, right? So I don't know if any of you heard of Franz Lanting, the famous legendary National Geographic photographer, and he pointed out there's also another thing about the human perception. What he said is after his many years of taking birds and wildlife photography, he said the key thing in wildlife photography and bird photography is that you must be getting eye level with the animal. Why? Because we all grew up going to the zoo, for example. And what is happening in the zoo? Most of the time, we are looking downwards to the animal. And so when you get a photo, or if you're looking up, so if you're shooting up or shooting down on an animal, people immediately feel that this is not like in the animal's world. And so Franz Lanting always get really, really low when he photographed the wildlife and when the birds, and then he build up the ladder and whatever to get that, right? And all the time is the eye level. I don't know if you guys have photographed kids, like if you have kids in your family and all. If you shoot from above, shoot down on them, and comparing with if you really kneel down or even get to the ground and take a photo of them. And when you get the eye contact of them, the photo will be completely transformed if you are in their level. So this is also very important. And unfortunately, most of the judges, me included, when I was the Nature's Best Photography Asia and Viewbug and all, and so I knew what the judges were looking for. And is that if you submit a photo to publication and those, once the judge sees that your photo is not really eye level, meaning that like if you go into our group, not to say bad things about the group, is that we are all here to learn, right? And I swear to you, I was like that exactly when in the first 2 years of my photography, everything was shooting up. Everything is shooting up. And so like I saw a peregrine falcon one time. I was so excited. I was pointing vertically up and shooting into the sky, and I was like, so happy. I jumped for 10 minutes when I got the photo. But nobody cares, of course. And the reason is that when people see the sky background, basically you're shooting up, you see the bottom of the bird, for example, then it's a no-go. And of course, there are methods to solve that too. But now you know, those are good viewing, but not good for photography, right? So what is number 3 here? Number 3 here is no distracting shadow. So another thing that I just saw today while browsing through the group is a lot of you post photos of birds in flight or other animals, and the action is great, and I'm glad you guys were able to witness the moment. But the shadow, but the shadow was so distracting. So what do you mean by shadow? Right? You asked me, right, Tin Man. So the shadow. Let me show you an example right here. So this one. I don't know if you guys can see this one. This one is the mountain goat jumping in Mount Evans in Colorado right here. So anybody can tell me where are the shadows? What do I mean by the shadows right here? And of course, first of all, you will see that you will see this little mountain goat baby jumping and all. It's all nice and all. But if you look carefully, you can see that right here, this part, shadow, and this part, shadow right here, and this part, shadow right here, and also right here, shadow right here. So if I didn't tell you, you will not know. But now that I mentioned to you, and if you go back to your to the photos, like your own photos and the photos in this group, if I ask you to just do one assignment today, just to look for all the shadows in each photo, then you know. And for human perception again, when we see shadows, we immediately look into it. Why? Because somehow we feel that there must be something we want to see in this darkness and stuff like that. And then you just draw the eyes. Like the goal, like in the post-processing, is to draw the lines to the hook of the image, right? Not drawing the lines by this shadow. Shadow is like black holes, right? It sucks people in. So if you have all this like pure black thing that is really frustrating in the image, people would be so distracted by it. I mean, judges will be so distracted by it. So you lose photo sales. You lose the opportunity to move people, and it is deadly. And so for example, let me see what else are we looking at. Like you see that like in here, like these are the shadows, right? Because the light like created this shadow right here, and so the shadow is everywhere. But then you have to. It's almost like the Matrix, right? If I don't tell you, you'll never see them because we are so full of ourselves. I'm not about you. I'm so full of myself. When I first started photography, so my photo is so good. Look at this beautiful moment, right? I still remember one time I went to San Joaquin National Wildlife Refuge. Anybody have been there? Is in Los Angeles, and it was during the sunset time. I saw that there is this stilt. Is it called stilt? Yes. So this stilt with long pink legs, right? And I was watching a mother there in the water, and during the sun was setting, right? And then I was standing up there, right? Of course, I was standing up, and then suddenly these little chicks suddenly went to the mother. And then they all hide under the wings and the body of the mother. So the mother bird has all these little feet, and it was like really, really sweet moment, right? And I took a few photos right there, and then I posted it, and of course nobody even cared. And I was like, dude, this moment was so beautiful. But after a while, when I look into it, I see that first of all, the light, I didn't pay attention to where the light was shining. The light was shining on the bird, so there are lots of these shadows right here. And on the other hand is that I was shooting downward, so there's really no connection with the viewers on that. So and then the background was okay, because at that time I already knew that background was very important. But still, I make these two mistakes. And later, when I went back to the place and I made sure that all these 3 ingredients is included, then the photos started to get probably 10 times, 100 times more response. Then I realized that, maybe it's actually my not knowing it. to cause this thing, instead of blaming at people like, oh, this guy is so famous, that's why he always get the light, or oh, this one because he has so many followers and all this thing. And then this is true indeed. I mean, if you have like 1 million followers, of course you're gonna get more likes. But on the other hand, there is also these reasons that that can affect your thing. So you don't want to be always bitter and blame on those reasons instead of looking into your own photos onto those, right? Okay, so this is some of the criteria of birds in flight, and I'm gonna check my time. Okay, we are still good in time. So let me see. So this is very important on that. And then you ask me like, so Tin Man, if you we have to look for those like. If I go to the pier closest to me or the bird sanctuary, I can never get this. This is all full of branches and stuff. And so the key here is that, I don't know if you guys have, some of you probably have heard about something called breeding plumage. And this is chicks and parents. So what I mean by that is you can spend 10 years going to the pier every day, and what you get is pelicans flying against some telephone poles or some buildings in the background, right? So you so you think about where you're gonna go. So what do I mean by that is if you, for example, if you right now, what is it? Now is March, right? So if you go to Florida, is kind of the prime time for like egrets, herons to have babies, and so before they have babies, right? So it's just like human. The males, usually those male birds, the color of the feather will change right before they have babies, because they want to impress the females, right? So their feather and the color and everything will just change to such a beautiful, stunning look. Like for example, I think the great heron, right? They have the great egret, right? The bill would just turn green, right? For example, and you know all these color changes and all, and they look the most stunning onto it. And when they have babies, their color still remains. So if you go to look for those birds in their breeding plumage, and when they have babies, not only will they look better, but the other thing is these egrets and all, right? So for example, this is the nest, right? So because they may have like 5 chicks, for example, and what do? They have to feed the chicks, right? So what do? Is they will keep flying out and then bring back the food here, like probably non-stop. And if you wait at a place where the background is nicer, like a smooth background on sky background, and when they land back onto the nest, right? Sometimes the nest is not that high, and so you can, if you are at a distance from them with a 500 millimeter lens and all, you can the bird almost look like they are flying eye level, right? So if you go to a place like that, maybe one evening you will get 50 or 100 times opportunities for these birds to fly back and forth. And instead of going to the pier where you just see the pelicans fly by maybe twice in the whole evening, right? So there's no comparison on that. And when I was in Alaska this past year, I went to a place where all these tufted puffins would just circle around me. And so what you do is you try to focus on them flying towards you, and if it failed, what do? Do you wait for the next day? No, they keep coming back. So what they do is they do these circles non-stop. Each one will do 5 big circles near before they land. So you have 5 chances every time when they fly by, and then if you fail, you wait for the next one. And they're all in their breeding plumage too. So this is the one thing. So one tip I can give you is, for example, check out Florida, like the alligator farm in where is it? I forgot the name, but I'll put it in the comment below. This is a very good place for you to practice birds in flight, to look for the background and the time. Oh, and before I forget, there's also another thing that I was very surprised in the beginning, but now it becomes the norm, so I don't talk about it. But when I first joined a lot of those photography workshops and tours, I spent a lot of time learning from the experts that I admire. And if you haven't joined those, you may not know, but if you join some of those bird photography workshops, their schedule is like, okay, we meet before sunrise. and then probably 2 hours after sunrise, we go back to the hotel. And then we will start to go out again 2 hours before sunset. And then in between the time, we have lunch, and then we go back to your hotel room to back up your files and all. And in the beginning, I was like, dude, I pay $3,000 for this trip, right? How dare that the leader asked me to go back to my hotel room to back up my files? I want to be there all day, right? I want to be in the field all day, right? To photograph. There's non-stop action. Why would they do that, right? And turn out that really, if you don't want any distracting shadows, the only time you should photograph a bird is really within the first hour and a half after sunrise, and maybe an hour and two before sunset. That's the time when the sun is at a really steep angle, and that creates very saturated light, very soft light, and then you wouldn't have the harsh shadow like that. And so this is actually a very simple idea, right? If you think about it, you only go out when the light is good. You only go out when the shadow is not distracting. Then, of course, every single photo you take, if it's sharp, then there will be no distracting shadows, right? But instead, you keep on going for the whole day, and I still see a lot of photographers who go out all day to click nonstop. They take thousands and thousands of photos, but all these photos, like 90 of them would have what I call the cockroach in the noodle soup, right? The chicken noodle soup, or if you don't eat chicken, like vegetarian noodle soup. There's no use. You basically just go home and delete the photo, and then you get mad at yourself because when you try to submit it to any publication or try to sell the photo, people are not gonna post that, and they're not gonna accept that, and then you get mad, and then you give up photography at the end. So after you think about those, then it is very important. And for example, I want to show you another thing is so once they have chicks, right? Life becomes very busy, right? All these parents keep on coming back. Before they have chicks, they will keep flying back and forth the nest with the nesting material, for example, to build the nest, right? So you get all these spectacular photo with like big branches in the mouth for the egress and all. And when they have chicks, the parents keep bringing back food, right? And for example, this photo right here, if you can see it here, okay, right here. So this is a burrowing owl. So I like backlit sometimes too. So landing, right? And of course, look at the ground here. So it's eye level with me and all. So this one maybe go beyond a little bit about what we talk about today. But what I want to show you is if comparing to going to a pier and wait for pelicans to come, it's better to, like for example, this photo is taken in Southern California, where in May or June there are a lot of burrowing owls, like near Palm Springs and Chino, those areas, right? And in Florida as well, there's some famous places that you can see a lot of burrowing owls. And the problem is, so I made these mistakes before. I would go in to look for those burrowing owls because they are year-round. So you go there and then you wait for them. And if you go into like if you go in February, for example, you will see this parent, like the mating pair, burrowing owl and all, and then you get all these photos. The problem is that I spent many days during February before, and I never saw them fly because they just don't fly most of the time. And so you wait for them and then you get maybe the headshot and that's it. But if you go right when the chicks are trying to learn to fly and then they were very active and the parents, they're growing bigger and bigger and the parents need to feed them more food. Oh my God, if you go to that place and if you find a nice nest of the burrowing owl, like for example, the one that I photographed, there were a good friend told me the spot and there were 8 chicks and 2 parents. So there were 10 owls constantly flying back and forth. So in one evening, I could get thousands and thousands of photos of those. So the key is to increase your chance. Is the main like it may go against your belief that I need to practice my techniques and all, right? But if you don't plan you don't have a nice game plan seriously, then you would not be able to capture something that like it doesn't even give you opportunities. That's a problem. Like for this one, right? One evening with the burrowing owls, I can have like maybe 500 times of their coming in flight, taking off flight, right? So if I'm really, really bad as a bird in flight photography, like sometimes the blind squirrel, right? That's what the famous saying, that you can still get some nice photos. But if the opportunity never came, then what can you do, right? So that's so the key here is like that. And I another story is I love peregrine falcon, right? The fastest bird on Earth, right? And I spent so much time looking for them. I remember I spent so many times. I went up to Morro Bay because I heard that there's a rock, Morro Rock, famous for peregrine falcon. So I spent a lot of time over there, and people have all this spotting scope to look for the falcon. I was so excited. And I spent days there, and all I got was just a small dot of the falcon flying above the rock, and I was shooting up the sky. And eventually, some years, you can actually find nesting peregrine falcon, but then, the location changes and it might not be reliable every year. But if you know the location, and during the time when they have chicks and all, they just keep flying back and forth, and you get all these opportunities, eye level and nice background and all. So it's all about really the planning of it. So today we talk about the 3 criteria, and so kind of not very polite to ask you for that, but now that if you see these 3 criteria, you can go back to help me in our group, in our winning group, and say, Tin Man, how dare you do that? Like if you look into a photo, people posting, and then they ask the critique, you can start to look at these 3 things, and of course be nice. Always say what you like about them, about their photos first. But if they clearly has certain like all the branches in the background, and then is really shooting up or down, like shooting high up to the sky, or if you can see distracting shadows on the animals, right? You can kind of point that out politely and say that, hey, I listened to Tin Man's talk today, and now I see this thing. Maybe you can think about how to improve on that, right? So this is really my first assignment to you on this thing, and well, 30 minutes is done, and I'll continue next time, but I'll continue more about like the quick draw technique, right, which is the most important technique of birds in flight, right? For example, if you're a bird flying by, and then if you raise your camera, look into your viewfinder, which is what happened to me before too. I raised the camera and say, where's the bird? And I put it down, and then the bird flew by. Done, right? So the initial acquisition is very important, and I believe a lot of you have already downloaded my Birds in Flight guide about pre-focusing and all these things. And pre-focusing is very important, of course, and I'll elaborate more next time on more about the techniques. But anything, right? Any techniques, no matter how good your technique is, if there's the opportunity is not right there. Like if you never can find a clean background, and if you're always shooting up, like in Morro Bay, right, in Morro Rock, you're always shooting up in the falcon, it's impossible for them to come down. So you never get a photo, no matter how much time you spend there. And if the hours that you go out is wrong, like you go in the midday with the sun right above you, and then you hope to have some award-winning photo, then it's gonna be super distracting, and people are gonna puke when they look at the photo, unfortunately. So these 3, and then now you know that you have to really calm down and plan your trips. Like for example, okay, Tin Man, you're right. So this year may not be good to go to Florida by flying with all unfortunately, the virus and all. So be safe, guys. But I can plan maybe next year. Or if you're brave enough, you can still plan this year. And I think for Burrowing Owl is April or May in Florida. You just Google Burrowing Owl Florida. You should be able to find some information on that. Some people lead workshops, and you can actually go on your own to find them. I think they have signs here and there too. And just go like and there's a place that I really like called Lake Blue Cypress in Florida. That I think in March or April there will be hundreds of pairs of ospreys that would dive into the water and then bring fish back to the chicks and all. It was just a magical place. And imagine, like, all of you have been spending so much time at a telephone pole, right, looking at an osprey eating the fish. So I mean, they never really fly, and then sometimes the light was so harsh, and then when you took a photo, they are standing on this artificial perch. That is always not good, right? So if they stand on anything artificial, the photo is almost immediately disqualified for any chance for sales and for publication and for winning any award. So that's another thing, right? So there's no point to go to those places. I mean, I always enjoy seeing the birds, and I mean any days that I'm outside looking at them is a beautiful day, but you need to let go. You need to let go of those and just enjoy the moment. But if the opportunity is good, then go ahead to do that. Okay? So that's it for today. Let me spend another two more minutes to kind of look at the questions you have. Morton, oh God. Well, it's not. See, the thing is, once you learn that, you save yourself years of focusing on improving your skill to be fast, but really look at the big picture, right? And it is good to have an open mind. Like sometimes people's critique is right, sometimes it's wrong. So you have to have self-confidence too. Like if you think something is good, keep trying, and definitely don't be fearful to post on the group again, because I hope that, so I kick out people if they are mean in this group. So I want to have this constructive atmosphere in that, where everybody can be brutally honest, but then we can always learn from not attacking. And indeed, sometimes the critique may be wrong, and it doesn't really matter, because if you can see one comment in the 100 critiques that you can learn something, it is worth it, right? So that's it. So I appreciate you attending here and keep posting, but don't lose the faith. Keep posting, like and then you find something more. But okay. So and then Scott, for eye level, can you back up from bird to create eye level? Look even bird somewhat. Yes. So Scott, good question. So that's exactly what I meant by. When they were flying back to the nest. Sometimes, egrets, they have the nest that is high up. So that's why I recommend you guys to try the alligator farm in Florida. And you may ask me, like, Tin Man, are you crazy? You just mentioned that in the rules we are not allowed to go post photos from the zoo and all this. But the alligator farm, if you Google it, it is a very interesting ecosystem, where the alligator farms only have the alligators there, supposedly. But because of nature, these birds realize that if they have nests above the alligators, their chicks will not be eaten by coyotes. So after many years, they started to build this nest like almost at eye level all over the place, because they're alligators. So I also saw that the birds, if by accident they fell into the water, they will be eaten by the alligator. But the risk is worth it for them to protect the chicks, right? So it's fascinating over there. But that's why I want to tell you is the nest is pretty low. But if the nest is high up, yes, you have to use a long lens, and then you have to stand back, and then you kind of look around, right, for the nice background, the non-sky background right there. And so correct. It's always about the angle. So never get a lot of the new beginning photographers. They will say, "Oh, there's a bird, there's a nest," and then they ran all over it and then point up, right? And all you see is just the bird's butt, right? And then if they open the mouth, then it's even worse, right? So okay. Yes, Morton. So it will be very fun. So just keep posting and ask our opinions on that. Okay. Oh, is it Franz Lansing? Franz Lanting? I don't know. Lanting. So James, Lanting. He's one of the most famous and most talented wildlife photographers in the world. Definitely check out his photos, especially the albatross, right? He has some really legendary albatross photos. Okay, yeah, thank you. All right, so again, thank you very much for attending live. And if you're watching it for the replay, still definitely leave your comments here if you like it or not. What confuses you? And again, I mentioned to you that this is a very peaceful environment. You can ask anything. There is no dumb question. There is no stupid questions because we all went through it. And I gotta link you to an article that I need to write about how to use long lenses. That might be helpful to you because I share some of the embarrassing experience when I first started too. So that Morton, you feel better. And I think a lot of the beginning photographers, you have a good laugh on that. I'll share in the group. Okay, I think the magazine still have that online somewhere. So okay, so definitely leave the comment, and if you have any suggestion on my future topics in birds in flight, any challenges, right, or any camera model you don't know how to do it and stuff, just keep this comment alive, and I'll get back to you. Okay. Okay, so thank you so much again for attending. I hope you learned something today, even though I haven't talked about the techniques, but everything starts with the plan, a good plan first, right? To find the opportunities, then you go and grab the opportunity. Okay, all right, talk to you guys soon.